Hi, welcome to Dice Control Dojo. I'm Phil and I practice every day and share my tips so we can all get better at the casino. Today we're going to talk about the air and how we're fixing one dice too high. All right, so that would be when you throw it, if one dice is higher than the other, either way, either one is higher than the other. What causes it and what can we do to fix it? Remember, this series part is just looking at the air, all right? We're not talking about landing, and we're not talking about what the dice do after they land. It's only when we're looking in the air. So if we're doing our morning routine or our throw, and we got everything right, and then it happens that when you throw it, the green one, was a little higher than the red one. What causes that? What is the problem with that? So hopefully you see one dice too high and you pop this video in and we discuss what that looks like. So let's go over the basics on that. When one dice is higher than the other, this goes back to a couple different things that could be happening. One, typically when you're releasing the dice, right, sometimes one finger can release, okay, if it releases early. So when we're going back to fixing, we got to make sure that ledge that we're creating on our grip is remaining together, all right, and it's not releasing ahead of time. So when we're talking about one dice higher than the other, that could be that the one dice left and then one released a little early, which could have kept it lower than the other, or the other one released, one or two released. And by doing that, the dice, well, that was a good throw, bad example. It's hard to recreate a bad throw. I mean, there were 4 things wrong with that, but it wasn't the dice going high in the air. But what I'm trying to say is when you're setting up your ledge, right, and you have your 3 fingers down, when we do the opposite and we're looking this way, what happens is sometimes the fingers, one releases, or more appropriately, you may not see your finger if you're videotaping release, but your pressure of this finger is different than this finger. That's what's so hard with a 3-finger grip as opposed to people who use the tong and the yuri and all that. But the benefit of it is you can recognize what's going on with that. I feel that when you have this, sometimes it's a tong grip or a yuri, your grip variation can be unfixable because you don't know what you did on each turn. But with a 3-fingered grip, the par, I think they call it, right? Your 3 fingers should be nice in a line on that back. And but for some reason, when you were throwing, the pressure or the finger just lifted a little bit. Okay, so we got to make sure that stays taut, that these stay together. The second problem, that may be the first one. So say you threw it and they stayed together. The other thing is, are they at an angle like this? All right, so if they're off a little bit like this, when you throw them, let's see if I can recreate that. So I set my fingers up like this. Let's just say I just do 2 fingers and I'm throwing. See, that's an exaggeration, but you saw one dice went higher, the other just released down. So that means the pressures were not the same. Okay, and then that's going to happen. Watch. I'll do it again, but this time, instead of this one being up, I'll just put this one up. So now I have 2. So see, the other dice went in the air higher than the other. So with that could be the one problem, is the pressure. Okay, so let's say your pressure is perfect, but let's exaggerate and make the grip at an angle like this. What would happen then? Once again, exaggerating. We're talking millimeters of inaccuracy. That's why a lot of people don't believe in us. But I do believe you can correct this. So I did it this way, and you saw the reaction of the dice in the air. Let's look at the dice in the air when I do it off this way. So I'm throwing this way, and you can see, well, one went ahead, but one was still a little higher than the other. So those are exaggerations of the problem. So that could be the two different things that could cause them to be in the air. One higher than the other. So what do we do to fix it? Well, I have my trusty gripper that I can always go back to and make sure that my stuff is aligned like this, right? Now, as you probably have seen on my videos many times, when I'm gripping the dice, I know I'm doing different than 90% of the people. A lot of people like to put their fingers down on the floor and get them tight like that. And that's fantastic, because that just makes sure when you go to grip it, you have all of them together. That's fantastic. For some reason with me, when I go to grip it, I like to keep the dice tight together, because, a lot of times people's fingers are all over the place. Some people have fat fingers, skinny fingers, the middle finger's taller than the other two. So you have to be you and do whatever you do. And again, when I talk about, this is the way I'm doing it, but when you have a different grip and you're practicing and you're seeing, if you're doing the par grip, the three-fingered grip, this is the correction for if you see one dice in the air. So I make sure when I grip the dice, as you can see here, and I'm gripping, right? If you see, I have my outside two fingers pushing together to keep those dice together, right? Until I find the grip that I exactly want, where my things are aligned where I want them. Then I move the fingers over here, right? That's why I paint a lot, so that I make sure when I pull them over, they're aligning and they're lined up like this. But I run the risk with this way of doing it of not ensuring that these are aligned, and that is a big problem with me. That's why I paint them versus trying to practice a different way by like putting my fingers down on the floor and trying to keep them together. And I could do that with a quick grip, but I like to keep those dice tight like this. I like to keep them tight like this, and then put that middle finger and that thumb exactly, because I think that's so important to have them in the right spot. So I do that, and these are tight and gripped. Then I move them over, and that's where I run the risk of them not lining up. That's why I do that. But if you don't do that and you're just gripping and ripping, which is great, I really recommend that, and a lot of the coaches try and get you to do that, is have your finger down on the ground like this. Then you can grip it, and then it's even, and I can even check my little gripper, and they're aligned. So that's an excellent way of doing it. Another way, if your fingers are consistently not staying together, you could put an elastic band around your finger. I know it's weird, but just to make sure you're keeping that grip together, just if you're not opening them like this and you're just gripping, put an elastic band across there and see if you can keep your fingers together and tight. When one of my coaches, when we do this ledge and I'm sitting over the top, She's constantly making sure that these three fingers are together and lined up. We're constantly looking at that because that's where the one off is going to go in the air. So when you look at it in the air, see nice, and they're going together because they're aligned. So the two issues you're going to have with one dice in the air is either a finger releasing inappropriately, which is correctable, just making sure you get back together, maybe make sure these are aligned, and you can recognize that that's what's going on. Or two, they're not aligned. They're off a little bit, and you have to get back to making sure they're set in your set and where you want those dice to be set. They're not overcorrected one way or another. They're nice and even so that your dice. And remember, as always, your ledge, it's your thumb, has the least amount of pressure on it so that the centrifugal force can release that each time. So let's review what we're talking about here. One dice being thrown higher in the air. The reason for that is your finger pressures are either lifting, the pressure is different from one to the other, or your alignment of your fingers are off one or another. So we're probably going to repeat this quite often. There's probably a lot of problems with your alignment. So it gets back to basics, right? So if you're working and you're seeing one in the air constantly higher than the other, the next day on your practice is making sure your fingers are aligned where you want them to be. So your practice on your throws in the morning, your pickup is where the most important part is, because that's where your rub is. That's where you're not picking up the dice evenly, and the pressure isn't even from one dice to the other. So you want to make sure the pressure is exactly the same on both sides. So when you release, they're going together. Okay? So one dice in the air, one off. If you're practicing, work on that the next day on making sure it's even. If you're on the casino floor and you're seeing one in the air, get back to basics. Make sure you're aligned. Make sure when they throw that dice at you that your grip, work on that grip. Don't overthink it, but just look at the grip and make sure that you're either putting it on the floor like that, or when you're going to be at your turn and you're putting the pressure, that your pressure on those dice are the exact same left and right. So you don't want to overthink it. One in the air, as long as you're throwing well, that's okay. But I want to make sure when you're throwing it that the pressure is even on both sides. You're not doing something wrong. Go back to your basics. Use your game you've already been working on to get back. And then if it's consistently doing that at the casino, you can make a little minor adjustment, but you don't want to do big changes. Don't overthink it. It may correct itself after 2 or 3 throws. Remember, when you're at a casino, the pressure of your muscles, you're tighter, a lot of different than when you're home and you can fix it. So don't overthink it and just kind of see if they can line up together better the next time. Okay, so tomorrow we're going to talk about one dice too far. So that's when you're throwing the dice and one goes and is in the air ahead of the other one. What's causing that? And is it any different than one dice in the air? Who knows? Join me tomorrow. And as always, the best strategy that I do when I go to a casino is to ensure I practice every day, make my corrections, and make sure that when I'm there, it's just muscle memory and mental memory, and making sure that I throw for a long, long time.